So what that will mean, if will we still be first movers over the next 10 years in terms of ESG or making these steps to a sustainable agenda? I think that's a big question. At the same time, we also see other regions or nations like China, for instance, that are moving very fast when it comes to actually a sustainable agenda. And that's a good thing, I think, that actually we're not alone.
Drage dame i gospodo, dobar dan i dobrodošli u novu epizodu Liderova podcasta. Velika mi je čast i zadovoljstvo prvi puta u našoj povijesti snimati epizodu podcasta na konferenciji. Trenutno se nalazimo na Future Tensu u ovom prekrasnom malom uredu u kojem ćemo danas voditi nekoliko raznih podcast epizoda sa sjajnim gostima iz inozemstva i Hrvatske. S nama je danas poznata futurologinja iz Danske, Tamira Snell, s kojom ćemo razgovarati o raznim temama. Većinom će biti vezane za budućnost i biznis i naravno budućnost biznisa. Tamira, it's nice to have you on board.
Thank you for having me here.
So before we start the real questions, as we talked before the recording of this episode, what's the one Croatian word you learned during your stay here in Zagreb?
Pomalo.
Pomalo. And we're gonna take it slow. We're gonna take it pomalo. So Tamira, what emerging culture shifts should business really pay close attention to if they want to remain relevant in the, let's say, next 5 to 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a big question, and there is a lot of uncertainty, I'd say, as well, when it comes to cultural shifts. But what we are seeing right now is a geopolitical shift in terms of how we perceive globalization, for instance, and how we're seeing changes also within consumers and cultures with a much more regional or even local focus, with a proudness or a pride in terms of heritage, for instance, or local cultures, and wanting to incorporate that as well into everyday lives and consumption behaviors.
How do you think the future is going to look like?
Again, a very wide question. Many uncertainties. I think on the positive side of things, we're seeing a lot of tensions and frictions again in the global outlook that could, on the other side, turn into some actionable shifts in how we actually want to again create a betterment for society.
How do you approach forecasting in a world that really increasingly feels volatile and pretty unpredictable?
Well, we work more with foresight than forecasting, and what we do is that we actually, instead of seeing uncertainty as a bug, something that is uncomfortable, we try to approach and explore uncertainty and treat it as a feature, something that is it's something that every organization, every individual needs to navigate. And then we try to always approach the future as plural. So many futures. When we're here in the present time, we cannot just look for one future. We need to explore and map out many different both images, but also versions or visions of the future that are plausible, that are preferable, that are speculative, in order to get a full picture.
Do you think people and businesses are truly aware of the climate risks we are facing right now, but also in the next 15 years?
I think actually that most people are aware. The question is, what are the incentives? How is the puzzle going to be laid? Who will be in charge or responsible for what actions, what will be the role and the function of governments, what will be the role and the function of companies, and what will be the role and functions of individuals and consumers.
Because we're seeing a major shift in the European economy, especially with the ESG and all the standards. But so far, I think we're actually the pioneers in trying to protect the environment if we compare ourselves to some other huge countries and continents. How do you feel about that? Do you agree?
I agree, and also I see a change because what we're seeing right now is actually a pause in ESG regulations on the EU, but also on the US and Canada. So there is a slight shift towards a focus on competitiveness, that competitiveness is king, that there needs to be kind of like a business agenda that is being prioritized over a more regulative approach. So what that will mean, if will we still be first movers over the next 10 years in terms of ESG or making these steps to a sustainable agenda? I think that's a big question. At the same time, we also see other regions or nations like China, for instance, that are moving very fast when it comes to actually a sustainable agenda. So it's and that's a good thing. I think that actually we're not alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think working towards the same goal really kind of puts aside the division or the competitiveness between countries or even continents. I mean, even if there is a competitiveness, it should be a good one, because we're talking about the future of the planet.
Exactly. And if sustainability becomes something to compete around, that is also a good thing, because then it's good for business.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially.
Completely agree with you. In your opinion, what values will dominate the consumer mindset in the near future?
Again, a very good, also complex question. In the near future, I think primary consumer values will focus primarily on security, safety, maybe something about cocooning, even finding your safe spaces, but also a lot about actually quality of life and what that will mean for the individual in the shorter term perspective. Some of them, because then again it depends on regions and it depends. But again, we are as individuals, we mirror global events and the zeitgeist of the times. So we are seeing incredible geopolitical tensions and shifts going on, and that obviously also is reflected in our values as individuals.
Tamira, how do you think can companies move from trend observation to meaningful innovation that really aligns with human needs?
Well, I think that companies really need to remember to put the human in the center of things. And I see that often in my profession, where we take a longer term future perspective. We approach it contextually. So that is actually not really putting the consumer or the individual in the middle, in the beginning. But then you need to connect the dots, and you need to connect the long term with the short term. You need to connect it with, both the future perspective, with the present insights that you have about your consumer base or about your employees, or where that human ingredient. And then you also need to anchor it within an understanding of past narratives, what have been the lived experiences that are informing us as human beings in terms of heritage, rituals, traditions, norms, all the more invisible aspects of why we are actually behaving like we are. And connecting all these dots is something that is increasingly important for actually really understanding and putting consumers in the middle.
What societal taboos or underexplored areas do you think offer the most potential when we talk about transformation?
Taboos. In terms of transformation, that is actually a very good question. So in terms of what we do not speak about,
yeah,
or
exactly.
what we don't want to address?
What? Actually, both.
Yeah, as companies or as individuals?
As individuals.
I think there is something very interesting going on in terms of how we are discussing our perception of body ideals.
Okay.
So there is
Agree.
something in terms of how we want to represent ourselves, and there has been over the last decade. So this is just one example, but over the last decade, there has been like an explosion of accepting all different kinds of bodily expressions and all different sizes, all different ages. And at the moment, there is still some kind, in my opinion, some kind taboo of a shift towards something more traditional, or something, what constitute a body ideal. And there are still types of bodies that are left out or not discussed in terms of what creates a healthy body and what is an unhealthy body, what is a normal body and what is an abnormal body. And these things are more difficult to articulate sometimes, or have become a little bit more taboo. So there is some conflicting or tension within that.
And Tamira, the last question, I always hope, and I mean, it's statistically proven, we have a large younger audience. Mm-hmm. What's your message to them? For those who are just starting out their careers, trying to find their place in the business world?
Well, I have a lot of hope in you. I think what we see in terms of the things we've discussed, in terms of awareness, in terms of values, I think many of the research studies that I'm reading into indicates that we have younger generations that are very aware, that are very also concerned with not just their individual career, but also with the global, with the future, with the global perspective. And I think that dynamic is something where I have extreme faith in this younger generation, and then I think you are going to teach us all in the end of how to lead future lives.
Thank you very much, Tamira.
My pleasure.
Dame i gospodo, bila ovo prva epizoda u nizu Liderova podcasta u suradnji sa Future Tensom by Lursen. Naravno, za sve ostale epizode dovoljno je kliknuti ovdje dolje negdje na playlistu na kojoj će biti izlistanih svih 11 epizoda. Uživajte!